Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Susan Posnock, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs for Jewelers of America. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler and Jewelers of America's co-branded webinar series. This month's webinar is sponsored by the Gemological Institute of America. Today, I'm joined with Michelle Graff, Editor-in-Chief of National Jeweler, who'll be leading our discussion on appraising lab-grown diamonds. Our guests today are Susan Eisen, Chief Creative and Appraisal Officer, Susan Eisen Fine Jewelry and Watches, and Gail Levine, Executive Director of the National Association of Jewelry Appraisers. Before we get the webinar started, I just wanted to let attendees know that if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box. I'll be back at the end of the main discussion to share questions. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this week. Now I'll hand it over to Michelle, who's leading today's discussion, and I'll be back to field questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you so much to Gail, and thank you so much, Susan P, and thank you so much, Susan E and Gail, for joining us today. Before we get started, Susan E and Gail, I just want you to give us a rundown of your appraisal credentials, and Susan E, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having this. Excuse me for giving alphabet soup, but I believe in being accredited with almost every organization there is. So I'm a certified gemologist appraiser with the American Gem Society, master gemologist appraiser with the American Society of Appraisers, senior member of National Association of Jewelry Appraisers, accredited member of the International Society of Appraisers, and accredited senior gemologist with the American Gemologists Association.
Okay, Gail.
So I'm the executive director of the National Association of Jewelry Appraisers for, 20 years now. 20 years,
Wow.
2004, yeah. And before that, I was the president of the board on the board of directors of the International Society of Appraisers. Let's see. I think that's really about it. I keep my focus very tight. I don't, I get my GG, not my FGA. I just keep my focus tight.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And both you ladies certainly have a lot of experience in appraising jewelry. So I'm going to start with kind of a history lesson. People who might not know who have joined us today. Can you give me an overview of diamond jewelry and loose diamond appraising, the process of that before lab-grown diamonds hit the market en masse? Like, what was your appraisal? Somebody comes in you with an engagement ring, a necklace, a pair of earrings. Before lab-grown diamonds, what was your process for appraising a diamond? And Gail, I'm going to start with you.
So, because I don't do that much appraising, because, I'm the executive director, and when you have 800 members, you're kind of busy, but I am selective about the appraisal assignments that I do accept. And there are many for color diamonds, and for antique imperial jewelry. So, I have, I'm sure like every appraiser out there, just lots of instruments and tricks of the trade, and a righteous microscope, and a hawk loop. I mean, we have all that stuff to arm us to appraise diamond jewelry. And as the years have gone on, you add more to it, like cross polarization and some other instruments that are well under $5,000. Yeah.
So Susan, on to you. What was your process for appraising diamond jewelry before lab-grown diamonds were in the market? When your store's in El Paso, Texas, I think we mentioned that.
Yes.
And when people would bring you something for appraisal, how did you handle it pre-lab-grown?
Well, first of all, I love tools. So I have as many tools as I can afford. But of course, the steps are the description, the weight, the color, the clarity, the manufacturer, the design, the cost, the markup, all different kinds of things that we have to use. Of course, we would test for diamonds. We would look up pricing. We would call vendors. We would do a lot of things that are part of the appraisal process. And we also would need to know what they're using the appraisal for. what's the purpose and the intended use. And it does make a little bit of difference, not so much with this this webinar, but we still have to do the same exact things no matter what the purpose is.
Okay, interesting. So how is this process different today, given there are so many lab-grown diamonds on the market? And what new tools have you added to your arsenal to help potentially identify man-made stones, or at least identify that the stone needs to be sent elsewhere for testing? And Susan, I'm going to go back to you on this one to start.
Okay, so we have 3 testing machines, and believe it or not, they don't always agree. Now, I've learned from all the testing that they've done with all these lab-grown machines that they all don't test for the same thing. So we had one time where a GIA said it was, yes, it was natural on the table and the pavilion, but on the side, the crown, we couldn't get a positive. So we had to send it to GIA. And
I'm sorry,
out
Susan, really quick before you go on, do you mind sharing which 3 instruments you have? Because I know people are always interested in that.
I have the ID 100 from GIA, which I bought right when it first came out. I have the Sherlock Holmes from
Yehuda.
Yehuda. And then I have the OGI, and I don't know who makes that. And they're all expensive, and we use them all to try to make sure they all agree. When they don't agree, we have to send it to GIA. So that's the major difference. But besides that, it takes a lot more time now to use those machines and to discuss it and all that than it did when you just would use a diamond tester from before. And we had a few of those, and they were portable, and it was easy, and it's not so easy now.
And when you
And
say
so-
diamond tester, Susan, you were just testing that it wasn't CZ or moissanite. You were just testing that it was diamond. That was it.
That's right. We didn't really have to worry about all kinds of things. However, in Tucson once, I saw a big ad for someone that says moissanite that tests as diamond.
Okay.
And I took a picture of it. I still don't know what it is, but I think it's coated with something. So yes, we still had to look for treated diamonds. We had to look for fill diamonds. We had to do that, but it's just not the same. It takes a lot more time now, a lot more equipment, and then we have to keep up with the equipment. They have all kinds of updates, and there's all different kinds of things, so it is more problematic. And sometimes we find that in a ring with lots of melee, 1 or 2 of them are lab and all the rest are natural.
Yeah.
And that's an issue too that I never really encountered that much when I was doing appraisal of natural diamonds. So we have to, of course, tell the people that. And if we're buying the jewelry, we have to remove the lab grown and put a natural in so that we can sell it with a clear conscience.
Okay,
Susan,
that's very interesting.
just a quick follow-up. We did have somebody wanting you to repeat the names of the 3 machines that you have.
Okay. IGI 100 from Gemological Institute of America. Sherlock Holmes from, what you said it,
Yehuda?
Michelle?
Oh, that's
Yehuda.
Yehuda.
And OGI, and I bought it from Stellar, but I don't know the official name of or who made it. And they're all very different, and they do different things, and they all have their issues.
Yeah, we are looking for that magic black box that would tell us
I know.
immediately that it's synthetic or diamond. But
I
you
don't know that
know,
that black box is ever forthcoming. I think
really?
everybody's been looking for that magic black box
Yes,
for a long
for
time now.
everything, for
Gail,
everything.
I'm sorry, I
Yes.
didn't mean to interrupt though. You were going to answer the question. So how the process is different today for your members. Do you have anything to add to what Susan said? Like
Yes, so
obviously
in the-
more time, more instruments, and which also obviously equal more money.
So in the past, we may have utilized the instruments to differentiate perhaps moissanite, you know, with a little clever little point, and it says moissanite, yes, diamond, no. And other synthetic stimulants from diamond. We can also rely on simple observation for separation. For instance, with moissanite, if you look down the C-axis, you see doubling. With CZ, you put it a table down on print, and you read through the print. So that makes it really simple. But you know, with the synthetic diamonds, it's something else again. So I also have the Yehuda Sherlock. I also just recently got from Kasoy, Smart Pro. And,
Just so she said Kasoy, everyone, Smart Pro, in case somebody didn't catch that.
right, but, and so this, when you touch the pointer onto your colorless, material, it will come up, synthetic, moissanite, CZ, or diamond. Now, my concern with that is that how good is that pointer? How long is that going to last? You know, but but you know, you just need more and more instruments to for it to be reliable. And like Susan said, if one of them gives you a bum answer, then it has to go to the lab, you know, because they have the $20,000 machines that will do it.
Right. I want to go back, Gail, to a point you made about the Kasoy machine. So do you, if it says when it gives you the result, are you sending that to the lab to double check anyway, or are you going with that?
Well, it all depends on the other instruments too. You
Okay.
know, like the cross polarization and fluorescence and the Yehuda. So, you know, it's like Susan said, it takes a lot of time to do jewelry now, to do appraisal. And so that adds up to the time you're going to charge a client, because you really can't cheat, you know?
Michelle, can I add something? There's a learning curve with the machines. They're
Yeah.
not all straightforward. And another big issue is doing the research for what the actual value is, because the price is changing so much that you check the internet. If it's an internet purchase, you check a jewelry supplier or a diamond supplier. There's a lot more research involved, because from one day to the next, you see the price radically different. And because the effective date that's on the appraisal is what rules, that date is what we do the research on, and not past dates and not future dates, only what the date is when we're doing the appraisal. And that's been a big issue with lab-grown diamonds.
I want to come back to this whole issue of value, Susan, because we're going to end this conversation later in the discussion. But for now, I want to know, would you say the majority of people who bring lab-grown diamond jewelry engagements to you for appraisal, A, understand what they have and how it differs from a natural diamond in terms of value? And well, first, do they know what they have? And B, do they understand how it differs from a natural diamond in terms of value? If people have a lab grown, and do they know they have a lab grown, and do they understand how that's different?
Did you want me to answer that?
Susan E., yes, please.
Okay. No, no, and no.
Okay.
The first question was, repeat it.
Sorry, do they know exactly what they have? And then when it's lab grown, do they know exactly what they have? And then B, do they understand how that diamond differs from a natural diamond in terms of value?
So some of the women that come in with engagement rings don't know. I'll say, do you have any paperwork? Do you know where it was bought? Do you know if it's lab or natural? They say no. Sometimes the men or whoever it is that gave it to them doesn't tell them. So they don't always know. Secondly, there's limited information on lab grown from the salesperson. If you're trying to sell a lab grown diamond, you might only talk about the good qualities and not the bad qualities, and there are good and bad with both natural and synthetic. And so they don't always know, or maybe the person who bought it knows, but maybe they didn't translate that to the person who they gave it to. So it just depends. It's all over the board. All different kinds of stores do different things. All appraisers do different things. There's really not one set way that everybody follows.
Okay, that's
Well,
interesting to know. I'm always interested from the consumer point of view, because we talked about this briefly before the webinar started, but we talk ad nauseum within the trade about it. But I'm always curious, like, what does that actually translate to in the end consumer? Like, what do they know and what do they think, and how much do they care too? But we're going to get more into that later. Gail, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, not at all. So what I found is that with the Gen Z who come in with their engagement rings, that they do know that it's lab grown, but they are surprised at the volatility of the pricing, which is not disclosed when they purchase it. And the reason why they purchase it is because it's X amount per carat lower than a natural diamond. And you can't tell the difference. It's just, no one will know unless you tell them. So when they come in and they show me what they have purchased it for, and which is probably what, 3 to 6 months. And then they find out what today's value is. They go, oh, excuse me. Well, and pretty much it's the value of the mounting. It's gotten, as a matter of fact, lab-grown diamonds is cheaper than moissanite.
That's
Go figure.
interesting.
Go figure.
So I want to go back. I actually thought I want to get to value now before we move on, since it's been mentioned twice now. So what are you two using, Susan, you kind of started into this, but what are you two using to peg the value to? I mean, what are your sources and how are you doing that? And would you say that's the most difficult part of the appraisal, like trying to figure out, what's the value of this according to what? And then do you speak to the consumer? Do you tell them, these prices seem to be going down, or is that something you don't mention in any appraisal ever? I don't know. This is a genuine question for me. Susan E.
So when I recertified AGS 2 weeks ago, I was surprised that it said that they do not recommend that we talk about the future value or
Yeah.
the past value.
Oh, no.
Okay.
And so that's a new thing that I've never seen in any of the appraisal associations that I'm in. But in terms of research, yeah, it's a lot more research now. I used to use a couple of different publications, and now every day we get copies of price lists for lab grown. We get
True.
these magazines that have lab grown prices in it. So we can use that. We have to call people. We have to call vendors for natural still now, because there's kind of volatility in the natural diamond, not as much, of course, as the lab grown diamond. And so then we have to find out, well, what's the average markup? Because the lower the cost, usually the higher the markup. That's how the jewelry industry has usually been, from my understanding. But the stores that are selling a lot of lab-grown diamonds, need to make money. So that's another thing we have to research now. It's not across the board the same thing.
It's
And
not
so
like Keystone
everything
anymore.
is different. Everything is different now.
Okay, and this is adding additional time to what's already taking more because of
Yes.
more testing.
Well,
And
like
you're not-
Susan, like Susan, I get daily list of lab-grown diamonds from India and from China. And also there's this wonderful catalog from Speller on lab-grown diamond jewelry, which is, we have to, if you want to find out today's price, you call them and say, how about item, 2704, and then you get today's price. It's perfect. So that's the retail. That's a retail.
And
end.
Gail, do you know if they change their prices on the ready-made jewelry every single day? I know they do for
That-
gold.
No, I
But
don't
do you
know about
know-
every single day. I'm sure that they have to make adjustments to reflect the marketplace, but every single day, I have no idea.
Or once a month, or, with the change in the,
Yeah,
probably
no.
not, because they're buying them at a certain price and they have to make money on that certain price, no matter what happens to the market.
Could be. And I don't know their the business of supplies.
Michelle, if I can just interject,
Yeah.
at Jewelers of America, we've been getting a lot of requests from our members for them to have something to explain the virtues and, basically almost like a one sheet to talk about the benefits of each, whether it's lab grown or natural, because obviously we don't take a position on what our members should sell. That's their decision. But we want them to be completely transparent, including, if you don't know, don't make up something if you don't know what the answer is. And we're actually working on something that will be, available to sales associates to accomplish that goal and give them kind of a cheat sheet of the benefits and, I guess the negatives and the positives of each, and kind of a side-by-side comparison. But it does sound like with the way things fluctuate, even that is complicated by it. And, obviously it's a challenge to be able to talk about this with your customers.
Yeah, exactly. So last July, JA had this wonderful one-day event in Providence, and Michelle
The-
was there.
The
And Steve-
multifaceted learning workshop, which they're
Thank-
doing
thank
another
you
one
so
in New York at the end of the month.
Yeah, but it's going to be a good one too. I saw that the lineup. So Steve Reese from IGI had made a presentation of natural versus synthetic, and it was pretty much right on. So maybe you could tap into that. Tap into IGI's presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw
Yeah.
that same presentation again at the multifaceted learning workshop in Washington, DC, and I agree it was a good presentation.
Yeah.
And Susan, the Natural Diamond Council has some very good information also on, I believe they have it on both. I have it in my store, but I'm not sure if it all came from them, but it's very good information already.
Great. Yeah, we're really just trying to pool the best resources out there.
Yeah.
And share it with our members.
I want to talk a little bit about kind of the over-counter experience, the interaction you have with the person who's bringing in the item for appraisal. How do you handle the situation when it gets uncomfortable? When somebody thinks they have something that's worth X amount and they weren't told, perhaps they've had the ring for a number of years now, or, and it's worth a lot less than what they thought. Have you had any like uncomfortable situations, and how do you kind of deal with that?
Well, when they don't know that they have a lab-grown diamond, that's the first hurdle. And then the second hurdle is, that $10,000 you spent, that's the second hurdle. Talking off the ledge is you have to be very sensitive and very diplomatic, and not cast aspersions and not blame. Because there must be a number of reasons why this person bought this lab-grown diamond for the individual, and it just doesn't pay to go into that emotional scenario about why did he give it to you? I mean, he must have known. No, you don't. You just don't go there. You just don't go there. But talking him off the ledge is difficult. What about for you, Susan?
How do you
So-
talk them off the ledge though, Gail? I'm intrigued.
Well, I try to focus in on what the jewelry means. What was the intent of it? It's kind of like the same scenario when people come in to me when they bought jewelry in the Caribbean and they have overspent and they have no recourse because they didn't declare in customs and they didn't get an invoice. And I said, well, this is a memento of your 30th anniversary, and leave it as that.
Interesting.
Go to the emotion of what the gift was meant for, not that it's not worth it. That's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a good approach. I mean, that's how we're supposed to sell jewelry to begin with, is emotion.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a milestone, it's an engagement, it's an anniversary, it's a special birthday, it's a promotion. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
smart approach. What about you, Susan? Always interested
Well-
in the interesting encounters that go on
Yeah.
in jewelry stores.
Yeah.
It's
but
pretty interesting that you do have to be very diplomatic, talk about the good points of the jewelry, the beauty of the stone. There's also things like where you got it and when you got it, how did he propose to you? I mean, I try to talk about, just like Gail says, the good aspects of the ring that they have, not the negative. The worst thing you can do is say something bad about a piece of jewelry, even if you think it's not made well or it doesn't have good quality stones. You just can't say that, and you just have to be as diplomatic as possible. And let me tell you, you have to practice. That would be another good thing, Susan. Good things to say when people come in.
like a script.
Yeah, a little script. And we also just tell them about both things, and make sure that when they leave my store that they understand the difference without knocking one or the other.
Yeah, because I think to your point, Susan E., I think it doesn't do the jewelry industry any favors at all if
Mm-mm.
jewelers start trashing lab-grown diamonds or start trashing different pieces of jewelry and, oh, well, you got ripped off and this is terrible. And it just doesn't do the industry, even if that's
Yeah.
what you're thinking, it just doesn't do the industry as a whole any favors.
That's right.
So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, your position as appraiser. Susan, I know you mentioned you just got recertified from AGS. Is that what you said
Yes.
earlier? So has the wide distribution of lab-grown diamonds made you rethink offering appraisal services or being an appraiser?
Not at all. It's more of a challenge. I love to read about the new things and see what's going on and listen to the webinars and go to the conventions and hear the seminars. You have to stay, if you care about appraising and if it's serious business, which it is, you want to stay above it all, and there's always more to learn. So no, it hasn't changed my mind at all. And so it just does take more time. And so you just have to either build that in or take a loss at some of the extra time. But remember that you're learning every time you're doing these testing, how to be better at what you're doing, how to use the machines better, all the different things that come in that don't follow what the machines say they're supposed to be. And from what I understand, they're changing the all of the contents or some of the parts that they're making lab-grown diamonds with so that it can fool the machines. So as soon as that happens, then we're going to have to buy more machines. But
Yeah.
it happens with synthetic sapphire, synthetic ruby. It happened with all the gemstones. So we just have to stay above everything, keep learning. And no, I wouldn't ever say that I would not appraise a lab-grown diamond.
One follow-up question there. Do you think as you've appraised more and seen more and there's more on the market, do you think I know the process is longer, but has it gotten faster as you've learned more and you're working with the machines more? Have you become more efficient at least?
You get more efficient, but there's things that don't follow what they're supposed to on these machines. Like I said, the GIA machine, if it says pass, it is, from what I've understood, totally natural. But what about the one place that didn't say pass? So it's not faster, but you count it as a learning experience and getting better at your craft and being the best appraiser that you can be.
Do you think,
Yeah.
Susan, that I'm going to come to you in a second, Gail, I'm sorry. Do you think that,
Okay.
I mean, lab-grown diamonds are certainly keeping it interesting for you as an appraiser, right? Like
Yes.
you're still, you know, learn, even after all these years, you thought at some point you had it down and you're still learning every year.
We're learning every day with things that come into the store. I was telling one of my employees the other day, every day is a different experience at Susan Eisen. It could be a story. It could be an appraisal issue. It could be a divorce. I mean, there's been so many things that happen here. It keeps it very interesting. I love what I do. And when it's interesting, it makes it even more special.
Yeah, yeah. We have an expression at National Jeweler, jewelry never sleeps. And I think it applies because when I tell people what I do, a lot of people say to me like, well, what do you write about all the time? What is there to say about jewelry? And I'm like, oh, you have no idea. Like all the things
right.
that go on all the time. It never ends.
Yes.
Gail, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
the question was, have you ever thought being an appraiser because of the complications of lab-grown diamonds?
Well, you have to make sure that your client, your customer knows that it's going to take longer time because of the extra steps that you have to take. And usually they go, so it's longer time, it means it's going to be an extra fee or, you know, a longer fee. Is it perhaps, you know, unless, you know, all the forces are with me. But I still do appraise because with the group that I get, I don't get the older generation. I get the Gen Zs, and they're pretty smart in terms of that they know that it is a lab-grown diamond, but they're not smart when it comes to finding out that the pricing is volatile. So that's the part that really takes the most time. It takes the most time.
There's another thing, Michelle, about insurance. Why do we do appraisals? Mostly for insurance. Well, all insurance companies are not the same. Some of them replace and some of them pay you. And I had this long discussion with a Jewelers Mutual person yesterday about what if it's insured for 1,000, but then it only costs 500 now. What do you do about that? And the insurance company told me that they'll pay to replace it, whatever it costs. And so you have to also tell the customer to find out from their insurance company, is it a replacement policy or what is it? Because if they pay premiums on 1,000, but it only costs 500 to replace it, then there's a problem there, an inequality there. And that's another issue probably for another seminar.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Gail, any thoughts on the insurance piece?
So, in NAJA, we have a list of questions that we offer to the client, that the appraisers can offer to their client to ask the insurance companies so they understand what they're getting. Because the languaging of the insurance policies is not friendly. You think you understand, but then unfortunately, when you suffer a loss, they go, "Oh, no."
You know, look at clause 13 on page 47, like that's not
Yes,
covered.
exactly, exactly. So we do
And like, how
offer,
many people really read through those very thoroughly anyway? Probably
Exactly.
very few.
you know, was the same thing like when we, on the website, you know, do you agree to the terms and conditions? Well, of course we do. you know. Of course we
Right,
do.
right.
Yeah,
You're
who's going
right.
to read it? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So these are the 20 questions that you should ask your insurance guy, so that you understand what you're getting and that you're doing the smart thing with when it comes to an agreed value. One of the interesting things that I had, this was about 2 years ago, and it was beyond, lab grown diamond. It was a CVD coated CZ.
Mhm.
So it came up diamond, but when you looped it and you put it in a microscope, it didn't add up. And you kept saying, "This is wrong. This is wrong. I know it's
So I'm
wrong."
sorry, it was a CZ coated in lab grown diamond.
Yep, CVD CZ.
Okay.
Yeah,
Lab grown over a CZ.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what that, you're right. It's
Yeah.
a core, at its core, it was a CZ and then it was
Mhm.
coated with CVD with a lab grown
Right.
diamond.
Yeah.
Interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Did that person know what they had?
No, not at all. They bought it off the internet.
Oh, wow. We don't know you know everything on the internet's true, Gail.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have a couple more questions before I want to open it up to questions. I know Susan got some beforehand and I've seen a couple come in during the course of the discussion. Do you know any of appraisers who have gotten out of the game because of lab grown diamonds that have just said like, I just don't want to deal with this. I'm done. It's too complicated. I don't know what to tell people. Do either of you know anyone?
Well, a
I
couple of
did-
my members who were on the verge of retiring anyway, when this came up and they saw how much it was going to cost for the instruments, they said,
Mhm.
well, we'll just accelerate the process and retire. But a lot of appraisers in my group do not appraise, and they'll just state it right up front. We do not appraise lab grown diamonds because of volatility.
Mhm.
But how are you, so they're saying, but that could only apply if you knew what you had.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
otherwise they could be appraising lab grown diamonds, but they don't know until they're into the appraisal process what they're looking at.
Exactly.
Okay, that's
Exactly, yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Susan, do you know of anyone who's just said, I'm just not going to do this anymore?
I have heard, yes, some of my colleagues say they're not going to do those. They're still going to appraise. But that was interesting what you said, Michelle, about they don't know if it's lab until
Right.
they start the process. And
Right.
it's very difficult. It's if they say they don't do it, but they've already done all this work. And so what? Are they out the money for all this time that they
Right.
spent?
At that point,
doing
you might
this?
as well finish. Like, I think what they're saying essentially is if you know it's lab, don't bring it to me. I don't want to appraise it. Not, but if it's unknown and they start, I mean, I would assume, I don't know, but I would assume you just finish. I don't know what, at that point, you've already invested that time and you've already, you know, already taken up the client's time with the, however long you've spent examining the stone. So I don't know though.
I think
Everyone-
it's also that it's not just engagement rings that we're appraising. We're appraising all kinds of things. We don't know how old they are, where they came from, if they took them to be repaired somewhere, and if maybe one of the stones is a lab and the rest are natural. It's difficult now, a lot more difficult. We have to check everything
Right.
all the time.
Yeah.
And so just because it's old doesn't mean there's no lab grown in it or that there's no CZs in it. And we'll appraise anything. And if we don't know it, we're not sure what this is. Would you like to send it to a lab? Or we can tell you what it's not. We may not be able to tell you what it is, but we can tell you what it's not.
Well, I've heard that not heard, but yes, I heard that they are making all Europeans and all miners in lab-grown
Yes.
diamonds. Shoot.
I have seen those advertised and I wrote it down in case I ever needed any of those or to call those people, but it is incredible that they are making everything in lab.
Yeah, yeah.
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 That's interesting. Okay. I'm gonna ask one more question and then I'm gonna turn it over to Susan for our Q&A. Can you think of any product in recent history that has changed the process of appraising jewelry as much as lab-grown diamonds have?
Synthetic moissanite. Remember when synthetic moissanite came out? It turned the jewelry industry upside down. And C3, the people who came up with synthetic moissanite, they developed an instrument first before they released the product, which I thought was a very interesting twist because usually it's the other way around. And so they got a lot of negative publicity about that, in that people were saying, well, all they want to do is sell a useless instrument, and it doesn't mean anything. And even the governor of North Carolina said that this was an extraordinary thing for a manufacturer to do, was to first give information out and give an instrument to tell the difference, and then release the product. But remember,
Yeah, I
it
can
was
name
almost 3 to 5 years where we're going through all kinds of craziness about synthetic moissanite.
What year was that? Do you remember, Gail? Because by the time I started here, moissanite was already part of the conversation.
So let's see, 13, 20, 25 years ago, about 25 years ago.
Susan, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
So a lot of things. Gold, well, look at gold, up and down and
Ooh.
up and down and up and down. Pearls from China, the Chinese pearls that came in when we used to just do Japanese pearls, and how the prices have dropped. We didn't really need to buy all this equipment though. And with gold, we just needed to check the gold price. So it wasn't as difficult. Blue topaz, what about that? It came out as one price and now
That's
it's
right.
pennies. So there's a lot of things besides technology. We did a research on all the things technologically wise that have gone down: cell phones, computers, television sets. And this is technology. Lab grown is technology. And that's a good way to positively explain to the customer. You're dealing with high technology, and things in technology go down in price as the more people get involved and as it gets better and better. So those are some of the samples that we came up with.
That's interesting. Somebody mentioned the chat culture pearls, but I guess those are a little older than I was thinking when I said recent history, but it's also something that was new to the market at one point. So just wanted to point that out. Susan E., Gail, thank you so much. I'm going to throw it over to Susan P. now, and she's going to read a word from our sponsor, and then we'll start the Q&A.
Great, thanks everyone. Interesting discussion so far. And again, thanks to our sponsor, Gemological Institute of America. As a reminder, you can still type questions into the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. And while we're compiling the Q&A, I just wanted to say a quick word about our sponsor. This webinar is brought to you by GIA, the Gemological Institute of America, protecting consumers and supporting the global gem and jewelry trade since 1931 through research, education, and laboratory services. Now let's get started with attendee questions, and I'm going to start actually with a question that came in a little while ago, keeping on the topic of insurance. They wanted to know if insurance companies are offering guidelines on appraising lab-grown diamonds and holding their value or not.
No idea. Susan, would you know?
I can tell you that they're just getting to the point where they're requiring certified appraisers to do their appraisals. So they're way behind the times, and I don't think they care. I don't know. You send in an appraisal for $1,000. I think they're gonna pay up to $1,000, which is what I've been told. The problem is the customer, and if they're being made whole. That's what we always were taught. Are they being made whole? Are they getting more or getting less? I think it's a good discussion with a lot of insurance people on what they're planning to do about this when it comes up.
I think you made a good point earlier, Susan, like that the insurance aspect of it could probably be a whole separate webinar, which I will make a note of. And have someone from an insurance company on to answer these questions.
Yeah, definitely good questions.
Mm.
I think that we're gonna, obviously, the talk about value is a big one. I did have somebody, more of a comment than a question, wrote in, depending upon where a lab-grown diamond is purchased, the same diamond can be sold for 3 or 4 times as much. I feel like you guys have already alluded to that with the fact that the price is so volatile and changing so much, but is that something that you're seeing, that the same diamond is actually being, it really just depends, again, on the day and the time when and where the person purchases their diamond from?
Got finished exhibiting at the JIS show in Miami, and right behind me was the lab-grown diamond section. And it was amazing for like for quarter carats, inside out earrings. The difference in pricing was anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500. It was amazing. Lab grown, but it's a mounting platinum. Yeah.
Interesting.
Even at shows, it varies.
You
Even
mean
at-
from booth to booth? This vendor
Yeah.
has one price
Mhm.
and this vendor has
Yeah.
one price.
Exactly.
Susan, do you find the same thing when you're shopping shows?
Yes. If you're appraising for retail, then you have to know what the average markup is in your area for lab-grown diamonds. That's the research that we're required to do. And it's all across the board as far as what the markup is. And as the prices go down, like I said, the markup can go up. It's possible, it might not, but it's also very volatile what the markup is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions that have come in through the Zoom Q&A. This is sort of the question that comes up a lot with lab-grown synthetics becoming cheaper and more abundant and even more difficult to identify. I mean, this is an existential question, really. Will this destroy the image and therefore the ultimate value and desirability of natural diamonds? I'll let you guys go ahead and try and answer that question. I think from the JA perspective, again, it's really about being honest about what you're selling and being transparent in terms of what you're selling. But
Yeah, we've definitely hit a bump on the road with this. And lab-grown diamonds has pulled natural diamond prices downward. But you just have to remember that the marketplace will settle things out. Obviously, with the downward turn of lab-grown diamonds, there's going to be a point where it's going to settle into, say, $100 a carat or $150 a carat. And then natural diamonds can carry on with the natural course for being natural and for something that you would want instead of having something that's priced as costume jewelry.
Can I make a point here? And then Susan E., I'm sorry, you can jump in too. I think there are 2 points to be made. Number one, I was having this discussion. I was actually doing an interview last week about the future of lab-grown diamond grading reports, which is another conversation entirely, like reports, et cetera, not to be discussed here. And we kind of got into discussion about like, what's the future of this market going to be? And to this point about destroying the image of natural diamonds, here in New York, you can go up to Canal Street and buy a Louis Vuitton bag, what have you, a Gucci bag on Canal Street for 50, 60, $100, whatever they cost, I don't know. But, people still go into Louis Vuitton stores and go into Gucci and buy the real thing for thousands and thousands of dollars. And I think it's up to the industry to like make the distinction between both and point out, if you're buying something natural, it is 3 billion years old. It is helping this community. It is a rare gem. And if you're buying this, it's a technology project that's manufactured. I'm not denigrating the lab grown product in either way. I think they both have room to exist, but I think the industry is going to
Exactly.
make it work. And we see De Beers is doing this now. They just launched a new campaign with Signet on natural diamonds. I think the industry is going to have to shape the conversation around that in consumers' minds. That's my first point. My second point is, I don't see any reason people can't own both for different reasons. I don't know why people act like it's one or the other. People wear, we talk about all the time in the fashion with like high-low dressing, that somebody will wear I don't know, an expensive blazer from YSL or something, and then they'll put on a $15 Gap t-shirt under it. And there's no reason, I don't think, that you couldn't, save your money to get a natural diamond piece that's really special for something special. And then when you feel like a splurge, spend just a couple $100 on a little lab grown something as a little treat for yourself. Like, I don't know why the industry insists on looking at it at one or the other all the time.
Right, exactly.
It's just, we're hurting ourselves. Like, honestly, the conversation about lab grown diamonds has just brought more interest to diamonds and jewelry in general. Just like smartwatches the Apple Watch and smartwatches brought more attention to the wrist. So I don't think it has to be this all or nothing thing where it's people are going to get one or the other and that's going to be it for the other. I don't know why we approach it like that. Susan, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
I just read from one of the lab grown newsletters that price is the number one issue when people buy lab, that's why it's so popular, because of the price. That's some survey. We don't know what the future has to bring, but we do know that synthetic sapphire and ruby didn't take away, like Gail said, from natural. In fact, the natural diamonds that are, colored stones that are not treated have gone way up in price since the synthetic. So there could be this, seesaw happening where it's good because it makes the natural diamonds so much rarer, and they are rare. They're not going to make more of them. It's a different product. Like you say,
what's under the earth is what we have. So,
and we can't predict the future. We sell both and we appraise both, and we're open to whatever the future has to bring. And we just sitting behind the counter, it's our obligation to educate the consumer as to what they're talking about. That's why we do all these things and join and watch webinars and all that. And it just makes it something important for us to do as vendors and as retailers, since I'm a retailer. And the internet has its pluses and minuses. There's a lot of things that are not true on the internet. And so it's up to us to set them straight when they come in to sit down and buy a diamond on what they're buying and what's best for them and what they want.
And the argument of a lab grown natural reminds me a little bit of the way that everyone thought when Blue Nile first got big and people were buying jewelry online, that this was going to be the death knell for independent jewelers. And it wasn't. People go into jewelry stores. There's a lot of independents that have thrived and done well and figured out how to have their own online presence. It reminds me of the same panic we had over that, and the industry survived. And is fine. And people have now, independent jewelers sell online just as well as some of the internet only jewelers.
That's right.
Yeah. A website is like a business card now.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another good website topic, Gail. Another good webinar topic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your online store is your business card.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
kind of feel like we've gone through and answered the next question I have on the list, which was, asking kind of what the future is going to bring 10 years from now. I feel like we don't know what the future is going to bring.
I think I couldn't even, I don't know if you two agree. It's so hard to even predict what next year is going to be like.
That's
Like,
right.
I mean, it's just like
But-
things change so rapidly with technology. Everything's so volatile right now with what's going on in the world and politics and the environment. Like everything's always
Balls up in
changing,
the
but
air.
I
Yeah.
can't, I can't even predict what next year is going to be like as far as like business or anything. So I've no idea in 10 years what consumers are going to want, where lab grown diamond prices are going to be. I don't know. It's Susan E, Gail, any thoughts?
Well,
No,
it's interesting to hear people say, well, about the 2 shows a year, about Tucson and about JCK. They say, well, let's see what happens at JCK, then we'll know what's going to happen for the fall. That seemed to be a bellwether. That seemed to be where your finger on the pulse is. It's like when you go to these shows and you talk to the vendors and you talk to other people who are in front of the counter like you are, and get their take about what's going on. Then you see where their emotions are, what they believe in.
and when
Susan?
people ask me the question, well, what do you think about gold? Should I buy it? Should I not buy it? I said, if I knew, I would be swimming in the Bahamas right now,
Yeah.
and I would not be working here and selling jewelry. So they ask all the time about gold. So, and we don't know the future for gold either. It's been so erratic for the whole time that I've been a jeweler. For 45 years, I've seen it go up and down 3 times. And so we just don't know what the future is.
And as
Yeah.
a side note to the whole value discussion, I believe the Jewelers Vigilance Committee has on several occasions mentioned that they advise against any kind of discussions as of future value. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but there was a court case a few years ago involving Drew Brees, the NFL quarterback who had bought colored diamonds on the
Yeah.
promise that they were going to be worth all this money and they weren't. And I think it was just, I don't remember the exact outcome of that court case, but I think it's a good example of what the JVC says, cautioning against mentioning future value. You're not, licensed to be speaking about that. And Susan, that's really funny. You'd be on a yacht somewhere sunning.
Yeah, that's right.
We have an interesting comment that came in from somebody who says they work for an insurance company. They say, we rely on jewelers and appraisers to be the experts regarding the value of the piece. We are the insurance experts. As an appraiser, do you wish there were more insurance regulations regarding appraisals? Is the question. So I guess asking the insurance companies to actually do more when it comes to appraisals and regulate the market in some way.
I think
Well,
they should require an educated appraiser of some sort, some accreditation with some organization. Every store has an appraiser, whether they have taken ever any courses or not. So I think it's important that they have some kind of bar to where they require. Now, when I spoke to the insurance company yesterday, they said for certain prices of values of things, they do require them, but not for $1,000 item. But for a $10,000 item, yes. For a $20,000, so it's a scale that they use depending on who's doing the appraisal.
So it's not the appraisal document itself, it's the appraiser that has to be vetted by the insurance company. Like USAA, you have to be a GG to submit an appraisal to their company. They won't accept appraisals without a GG.
And the interesting thing is it takes more than a GG to be an appraiser.
Yeah,
You
but
have
it's
to learn.
step in the right direction.
Right, the right direction and the
Yeah.
right education. There are
Mhm.
2 different things, gemology and appraising.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
So
true.
we do have another question that's come in through the chat. uh, another, I think my answer to this person is you kind of have to decide what your market is asking for and respond to that. But they wrote, I'm a retailer specializing in natural diamonds and have hesitated to sell lab-grown diamonds. Would you recommend focusing exclusively on natural diamonds, or is it worth incorporating lab-grown options? And again, as a non-expert and just on behalf of JA, I really think that you know your market and who your customers are, and whether you're selling lab grown or not is really a question of who your customer is and who you want your customer to be and what they're asking for. But anyone else?
Also, you know, what your niche is, you know,
Right.
if your niche is only natural diamonds, stay there,
Yeah.
Right.
stay there.
I think it's great to have a niche. These, you know, are you the store that carries a lot of designers? Are you the store that specializes in color? Are you a store that's only natural? Like, are you a store that's very gold heavy? Like, I think that's important. And I think, you know, another point to make is, you know, not everybody has to sell lab grown diamonds. And I think if you, you know, do a little survey of jewelers in your area, if everybody's selling them, yeah, then that can be your selling point. You can stand out as the only jeweler that's the jeweler that's only doing natural. That way, when people come into your store, you can say, you know, that way people know, oh, if it's John's Jewelers, just to give an example, oh, I got my engagement ring at John's Jewelers, then you know, people will know, oh, well, that's a natural diamond. Like they don't do lab grown there.
I've
Susan,
gotten
what's your
a
opinion?
lot from, I've gotten a lot by being a member with the Natural Diamond Council. There's a lot of good information. And I have a billboard up that says only natural diamonds. But when people walk in and want to buy a lab, I have labs for them also. So I like to be a player in whatever is going, and whatever the customer wants really has to dictate. And I've tried to tell people different things. They know what they want when they come in, or they know how much they want to spend. And it's really hard to talk them out of it. So you might as well just, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, one thing to keep in mind if you do want to occupy that niche is like my store is only natural diamonds. I think that's fine, but you have to be comfortable then with losing business, with sending customers away, and someone says, you know, they have their heart set on lab grown for whatever reason they've decided that. You have to be comfortable being like, well, I don't sell them, but you know, X jewelry store down the street is. And if you're comfortable with doing that, then that's fine.
No,
So
stick with what you know.
we just have time for a couple more questions, and I've seen some lengthy comment with a question. They're writing in from Spain, and they say, as a jewelry appraiser and gemologist, when I have a diamond or natural color stone, I always make an assessment, not certificate, where I write the 4 C's. In my case, if it's a synthetic color stone, I only inform the client of its nature and do not carry out this appraisal. I only charge for the time I've spent on it if there are no other jewels to be appraised. So the question though is, my question is, what rates do you use for a synthetic diamond versus a natural diamond? And I think with the time that it takes, there was some mention of there potentially being a change in price, but is there a set difference in terms of pricing for the appraisal?
One size fits all. It's the
Yeah,
process.
I haven't
It's-
either.
it's the
I haven't
knowledge.
changed. No.
No.
And I mean, there's no way I don't even know how you would do that, because sometimes you don't even know what you're looking at when you start.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You just have to say like, you know, my rate is this is gonna cost this much, and you're just there. I mean, you're very impartial, right, Susan and Gail? You're just there to be like, no judgment, like this is just what I found and this is what it's worth according to my expertise and research.
Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly.
Another question that just came in about appraising a diamond, lab grown. Should we have to state that this appraisal should only last a year or 6 months, or any time limit when you do the appraisal? A day?
A week.
So the effective date is what the effective date is, when that's the value on the effective date. And most of you who are appraisers know about USPAP and how it's required that you put an effective date on the appraisal. And that's all it's good for, is that date. Just like we talked about, we don't know the future. So, you know, to say it might go up or it might go down, or, you know, you have to get it reappraised. I've seen those where they say, please get this jewelry appraised within the next year or 2 years, but really the effective date is the effective date as far as I'm concerned.
Susan, do you ever tell your clients, like, I would get this reappraised in a year or 2 years, or no?
No.
Reappraised?
I don't. I let the insurance companies tell them that. And what I found out is that sometimes they send them a notice that says they have to get it reappraised. I think it's a good thing for everybody to reappraise everything in 2 or 3 years, no matter what
All
it
jewelry,
is.
no matter what it is.
All
Yeah.
jewelry, yes.
Does this mean my mom's 54-year engagement ring is due for a reappraisal, do you think?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Overdue.
Yeah, usually there's a standard clause in the appraisal document that states that we recommend that that this item and other jewelry items be appraised once every 2 years.
Mhm.
And this is also, it's a good thing to do, not only to keep yourself, your jewelry up to what the current value is, but is also for the insurance companies, because they would automatically do an inflation increase. And sometimes that's more than the value, there's more than the piece is valued at, or sometimes it's less. So it's, you just need to do this on your own.
That's another discussion, Michelle, for the insurance about this automatic inflation that
Yep.
they do. And I don't think anybody should agree to do it because gold goes up and down. So
Yeah.
what if gold dropped and they automatically raise the value of your item 15%? Well, then you're overpaying on your premiums. So
Yeah.
that's when an appraiser can tell them to
Yeah.
look and see, has your insurance raised your value?
Right.
Susan, I
Again,
think
those are the
we've
two many
created a whole
questions.
new webinar for next year. I think
Yes,
we're ready
that's
to go. Will you
good.
come back on? Will you and Gail come back on?
Sure.
We make a good team.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. Well, thank you both, and thank you, Michelle, and our audience for
Sure.
today. We have run out of time. And of course, thank you to our sponsor, GIA. My next question will return, actually, appropriately enough, we're doing a session with
Yeah.
insurance providers on loss prevention and security. So stay tuned for more details. That's going to be in November. But thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and please take care. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all. It was
you.
great. We appreciate your
Thank you.
time.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for the invitation. We appreciate it.
Mhm,
Of course.
Thank you.
Okay.